Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest SAP Concur podcast. I'm Rachel van der Merwe. I've been with SAP Concur for 8 years now, spanning stints across Asia Pacific, and now I'm based here in the UK, looking after product marketing in EMEA. And essentially, what that means is I'm responsible to bring relevant products to the market for the Europeans. And today I'm here in conversation with Mark.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Mark Woodhouse. I head up our partner and platform strategy in EMEA. So working, of course, closely with Rachel and together with all of our App Center partners, bringing new offerings to the market. I've been with Concur about 1.5 years, and prior to that, I came from SAP, driving cloud transformation for our cloud resale partners.
Awesome. And today's session is all around compliance, but more specifically around VAT compliance, or what I like to refer to as external compliance. I'm really talking through some of the challenges that we have with VAT compliance and the complexity of that, of VAT reclaim, both domestically as well as foreign. And then talking through a little bit about how digitalization plays in this regard. And so we've recently launched a new solution, Concur Tax Assurance by VATBox. And Mark, I know you've spoken to a lot of our customers and different organizations about this new solution. And so I'd like to sort of really dig into that a little bit more. I think a really relevant sort of topic that comes up is, with sort of 2020 having COVID, 2021 is still with COVID. There's been a drop in business travel, potentially a drop in spend. Is VAT reclaim and VAT compliance still a hot topic for businesses today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you already touched upon a couple of points there. I mean, compliance with regards to VAT reclaim is a very, very key topic for companies as well. And I think that, even though travel is down, we all know that, VAT reclaim is not only about travel spend. There's, of course, less airfares. That doesn't really matter at the moment because, of course, airfares generally aren't VATable, so you can't reclaim on that. But I think, the compliance aspect is really, really important. I think that, there's elements of local legislation, regulations that, of course, companies still need to adhere to. And, of course, having a system that is compliant will, of course, help them in that process. And I know we'll probably come into more detail on it later. But I think if we go to the travel aspect and the overall spend, people are still spending. They're just spending in different ways from a travel spend perspective. So there has been an increase from a domestic spend perspective. I mean, we're all working from home. We're buying in office equipment. We're doing lots of other things, which of course still occurs VAT on it. So remember, there's still over 160 countries around the world where you can claim VAT. So domestic spend at the moment is a key aspect. And another thing is that companies that haven't, of course, maybe taken VAT reclaim too seriously in the past, you still have the possibility in some countries to go back up to 5 years and analyze and potentially recover money domestically as well.
Yeah, and it's also important to note that with the historical reclaim, right, that's calculated on a calendar month, not calendar year. So if your spend is decreasing, it's more optimal to look at things sooner rather than later, or reclaim sooner rather than later. And really, I think as I look at the market, organizations are managing this in three different ways, right? They're either doing nothing, right? They've never done anything because it's too complex. The risk of compliance is or non-compliance, sorry, is too high. And so that means that they're losing money or leaving money on the table. And in sort of this environment that becomes more important to bring money back into your business, then other companies are doing this sort of in-house, or I would also bucket maybe outsource into this in-house realm where maybe they have one or a small group of people looking at their VAT reclaim. But I think the difficulty of this is VAT reclaim or VAT rates change constantly. There's so many different nuances across different markets. And so the risk of non-compliance still is there, even though they may have some experts. You can't be a global expert. That's quite difficult. And a lot of companies are then maybe doing things partially, um, looking at maybe the biggest spend items, for example. And so not capturing all of their transactions and then sort of losing money, I would think, right? And so is that, what are you seeing in the market? Are there more customers sort of doing nothing, outsourcing? What are people doing in the EMEA market?
Yeah, and I think, so the customers I've spoken to, I mean, you've already highlighted the main points and the ways that they're actually doing it. So I can definitely confirm that there is a combination of customers typically doing domestic in-house, and from a foreign perspective, either doing nothing or basically outsourcing that foreign reclaim. And of course, these already there. I mean, we talk about compliance, we talk about the potential of auditing or non-compliant, and that complexity. And I think highlighting that there's two different ways already in a company that they have to manage and be compliant with. And of course, that's potentially also two different departments in that company. So multiple people from two different departments that need to be educated on the rules and regulations, also need to be audited if that's the case all of the time. So there's a lot of extra effort and time being spent. And of course, if we take, having human resources processing this data, it's of course a manual process, and every manual process is subject to human error. And especially when the complexity of reviewing, receipts and expenses with regards to the local tax authorities, as you mentioned. I mean, it's not just local, it's the global regulations they have to adhere to, both, when they're talking domestic, but also foreign. So it's multiple countries, and having that potentially 160 plus countries that they have to understand the nuances and the rules and regulations. And every resource that's doing this has to be educated in the same way. And of course, there's always room for error here. And of course, a manual process can also be inconsistent. So I think, there's a lot of complexity in the rules and regulations, and especially now, I think under COVID, there's different resources need to be kept in on top of the actual process here as well. We talk about compliance. So processing this data, if there's any indication that something is wrong, you'll be subject to an audit. And of course, that has a potential high cost involved in that. So the solution that we've come to market with will kind of take that away, and of course reduce the risk of being scrutinized by the local authorities. Now, I guess, for those that don't do anything, so potentially do something on the domestic side in one department and do nothing from a foreign perspective as well, or do nothing at all in some cases for some of the smaller companies, because they just haven't seen that there's a benefit in doing it yet. The obvious is there's money left, right? There's money left on the table. They're not reclaiming. And of course, especially now where businesses are struggling, it's extremely important that they can get all the cash flow and manage that cash flow better than they do in the current climate. And of course, if they don't do anything, more and more regulations are moving digital. The compliance aspect is there as well. So there's a real risk of being out of compliance. And of course, tax liability, if you have that, and non-compliance results, of course, in potential hefty fines.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about this new partnership and solution we've brought out into the market. It's really, I think for so many years, we've operated on quite a manual, arduous process. And now we really have that technology that is able to centralize and automate all transactions, to really maximize that reclaim. We as SAP Concur did a very deep due diligence of the market, and what we found is that VATBox is really the best combination of technology as well as expertise. And so specifically for Concur Tax Assurance, it uses AI machine learning to automatically identify VAT eligible expenses, to validate receipts, right? And to really optimize that reclaim potential, right? They're looking, and with this, businesses can sort of navigate that complex tax regulation much faster and accurately across all of their transactions. And I think it's really important to note as well is, the solution is looking at what is VAT compliant, not necessarily what is compliant within your own business policies. So if you've submitted groceries, they're not going to look at that of, okay, well, that's not within our teeny policy. What they'll look at is this something you can reclaim VAT back if it is a valid business expense? And I think one of the interesting sort of data points is that typically 42% or thereabouts of receipts or transactions that are submitted are actually disqualified. And this is items such as, credit card slips. When your employee submits an expense claim, they put their credit card slip. It's still evidence of spend, but it's not the right type of evidence that local authorities such as the HMRC require. Things like hotel invoices, and I used to do this quite a lot, is when I was registering, I'd put my own personal address because that's the one that I know off the top of my head. But that's also not VATable or VAT reclaimable. And so, I think with all of these little nuances, one of the most powerful things about the solution, yes, the technology is amazing, but is actually the insight that these dashboards bring to our customers. And I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit on that and give a bit of insight.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I think, you've highlighted some of the real challenges that people have. You mentioned the hotel receipts with your personal, address on and so on. I think that just having the ability to have full transparency from a spend perspective and also through to a what is eligible for VAT is really, really key. And so the ability to see that information, but also to drive compliance and maximize the VAT, through the dashboards within the solution is really second to none. Each dashboard, of course, is very intuitive. You don't need to be a tax expert to go through the dashboards. They're very clear, very concise, but also have all of the detail and the evidence backing up why is something not eligible? Why is something eligible? Where is the spend? What does the receipt look like? How is this being qualified or disqualified? What is being claimed? What has not been claimed? So there's different elements within the dashboards. So we can start with the compliance dashboard that is part of the product. I mean, you have the full ability to see all of the expense spend that has gone through Concur. It shows you also the breakdown of what's eligible and non-eligible for VAT reclaim. And of course, that's really down to the rules and regulations. It also shows the split between what is domestic and what is foreign VAT. It also shows you then what's been disqualified at a high level from a number of expense line entries and receipts, but also the overall value. But it also gives the user of the system the ability to see what has actually been processed and what has actually been posted and submitted for tax reclaim. So you get the full overview from start to finish. Now, of course, the things about being eligible and non-eligible give you the ability to drill down into that data. So it is extracting the data expense line entry, it's reprocessing the invoices or the receipts. And of course, things that are disqualified, you have a full breakdown of why and the reasons why it's been disqualified, down to the individual receipt level and expense line entry. So you have that full process and audit. If you get audited as well, you can basically prove the reasons why things have been eligible and not eligible, but also things that you've excluded. And of course, you touched upon the the hotel with the personal details, that's fully captured in the solution. So you can always go back to your employees and actually tighten up that loop of actually getting them to actually make sure that they can, first of all, put their business address on there. But also you could go back to the vendor or the supplier in some cases as well. There's another dashboard that has a vendor analysis showing all of the suppliers and vendors and who are actually good at providing VAT receipts and who is bad at providing VAT receipts. So you can actually use that information also in procurement to actually negotiate better rates for specific hotels as well. So really the whole solution gives you the overview of from start to finish of processing, where it is, whether it's compliant, whether it's not compliant, whether it's eligible or not, and all within one tool and a set of dashboards.
Yeah, that's really great. And also, I think one piece that I really like about the solution is the tax tailor module, which is where, for example, if you have an organization that's typically is, I would say, the larger end or enterprise organizations, they might have specific dispensations from their local authority, HMRC, and you can actually make just very slight changes to that to see how that maximizes or optimizes your VAT reclaim and what that means for you. But and I like what you said, Mark, which is, through all of these, you're actually educating yourself and being able to make very clear decisions in which you normally wouldn't think about when you think about VAT reclaim, like going in.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
when you talked about the vendor, that sort of struck a little light bulb for me. It's actually quite helpful, right? You can go in and actually speak to the vendors and negotiate and know who will bring that money back. So it's not all just about the day rate, and that's pretty
No, exactly.
special.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think another element or angle to this is employee experience, right? A lot of our customers, they'll rely on things like our tax tables, but also expense types to manage the different rules and regulations of VAT, right? But the reality is, as an end user employee, it gives me more headaches, and for the administrators as well, because it doesn't necessarily guarantee compliance and that the user is going to pick the right thing. I think a great example of this is public transport in Germany. You have a different rate for greater than 50 kilometers and less than 50 kilometers, right? As an employee, you round off, you're thereabouts, it's about 50K, and you put it in. There's no consequence to me as an end user because I still get paid for that spend or that cost. But for the organization, when they're looking to reclaim VAT, that's when it does matter, right? And so I think you still need to double check. You still have to kind of go through if you want to truly be compliant. And so, Mark, I keep coming back to you. You've had a lot of discussions, and I actually, I'd love to see if you could just share some ways that this solution has sort of helped them, like any kind of stories or interesting points that you have.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I think, just touching upon that with the end user, I think that's one of the topics that we discuss in every customer meeting. I mean, that optimization, the taking the burden away from the end user, because ultimately we all just want to get the money back in our pockets. And I think, this helps the company get money back in their pockets. So taking that burden away from the end user in terms of understanding what is a tax receipt or what's not a tax receipt, when should they put specific things in, I think this solution is kind of really catering for that element. But I'm not going to go into any names of specific customers here, but I think just to highlight a few of the kind of the elements that I've talked about with customers and what the benefits they get from this solution. And of course, we've launched this tax assurance by VATBox, and of course, prior to that, VATBox has got many many customer stories. I mean, they have many customers, so they've talked to a lot and implemented a lot as well. But personally, the companies that I've spoken with, apart from the obvious benefit of VAT reclaim and getting money back, we've also talked a lot around compliance. Companies are really have a key focus on that. They want to be compliant. They don't want to be subject to any fines. Everything that they submit needs to be 100% compliant, and they want security around that. So there's a lot of companies that decide not to process everything, even though they know they can, and also adjust those numbers and actually bring what they're actually recovering down when they actually submit, when they do it manually, just to make sure that they're staying in compliant and reduce the risk of potential fines. So of course, compliance is a big area. Optimization is another area. So optimizing that process. If you can optimize that process, of course, it means that you can process more. You can then potentially also extend the VAT reclaim, so maximize your VAT reclaim and still be compliant. So optimization falls under that as well. And of course, the other aspect of regulations and auditing, the education that's needed of all of the individuals that are being processing this information, that needs to be enabled in the regulations in the different countries, and 160 plus countries that you need to go through, especially from a foreign perspective. And that's of course why a lot of people don't necessarily do the reclaim in-house for some of these. So just I was talking, we have one existing customer, of course, that before the solution, their audit around VAT reclaim took them 7 days. Once they implemented the solution, that audit, of course, because there's full transparency throughout the system, it's audited throughout the system as well. The dashboards are there. That audit went down from 7 days to 2 hours.
Wow.
So again, it's a big, optimization aspect, but it's also meaning that they are compliant. And having a transparent system in that is following all the rules and regulations, the audit authorities or the local authorities can understand that this is compliant. We're happy with this, and of course can reduce the time and effort to actually do the auditing. We touched upon it also earlier, with regards to the vendor analysis. Again, this solution gives them more benefit than just the reclaim. So being able to identify hotel chains that, of course, potentially their daily or nightly rate, however you want to see it, is maybe cheaper than a neighboring hotel. But of course, if they're really bad at creating and providing VAT receipts or compliant receipts, then the company overall is losing money. So we have one company that basically identified this, and even though they were getting a preferred rate, which was cheaper on a hotel, it was actually going to be cheaper for them overall to go to a more expensive hotel, neighboring hotel, but then they could guarantee that they would get all of the VAT back from that hotel. So again, think of this solution as giving much more benefit than just the actual money back from a VAT perspective. And of course, I mean, the obvious thing, sorry to interrupt there, Rachel, but the obvious thing is of course the human aspect. So companies want to optimize. So reducing the time and effort that their employees do around checking invoices, receipts, looking at the policies, the travel policies, everything else, that's a long task for everyone to do. And of course, subject to error. So that's also a very big area that our customers are actually talking about.
Yeah, and the piece I was going to mention is actually the indemnity that is actually offered as well. There's such confidence in the accuracy of the technology to be able to do this better than humans. To your point, we offer that if there is any audit, and I don't believe to date this has ever had to be used. So it really just gives that peace of mind in addition to that time savings, because 7 days to 2 hours is massive. Wish we could automate a few more things in our business processes like that.
Yeah, and I was just going to say there, and of course, that's the actual audit process. If you think of all of the time and effort for all of the people that were surrounding and having to be audited individually that process all of the VAT reclaim before, now it's just one solution that needs to be audited as opposed to lots and lots of people within the organization. So it's a real benefit there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's really an end to end, right? Because a lot of customers, they'll automate their T&E process, save a lot of time in that processing reporting aspect with Concur, right? And now we can take that extra step and actually bring money in back into the organization. So it goes full circle, which is quite which is great. And
and I think
I
just
think
so
yeah.
if I can just touch on there, you mentioned the kind of optimization of the T&E. I think that in conjunction here with this tax assurance solution, we are really closing the loop in terms of, we're optimizing, of course, from a tax reclaim perspective. We're also feeding information back into the process and the policy within Concur T&E. So having all of that data really helps optimize the whole cycle within T&E and tax or VAT recovery.
Yeah, and I mean, digitalization as sort of a topic, right? That is something which we are seeing a huge trend on. I mean, it's been going on in Europe for quite a few years, but I think more and more governments are really driving towards this because I think, and COVID's really accelerated that need for it because,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I don't know if this is the exact right number, but VAT is approximately 30% of government revenues, right? So they're looking at ways to protect and to get as much as they possibly can because there's been a lot of COVID relief for people over the last sort of year and continuing on. And so digitalization makes it much easier for governments to monitor compliance and really increases that risk for businesses if they don't automate on that flip side. So I think that's also an important point to note is that trend with digitalization that's coming through. I think as we think about what are some of those considerations that you would recommend maybe for organizations who are looking at this but not really sure how to ensure their VAT compliance?
Yeah, so I think, the consideration is that if you're not doing anything, I mean, now is the time to act. I mean, this can definitely help you bring money back into your company, which would definitely be a relief for a lot of companies. I think that with the current climate also, there's a huge domestic opportunity. And of course, there's a lot of companies that haven't done so much, especially around the T&E from a domestic perspective. So it's even larger today. I mean, spend is occurring more and more domestic in the current climate. So I think the focus should be definitely there. Also, I mean, remember that you have that possibility if you haven't done reclaim in the past or little reclaim in the past. You have this up to 5 years in certain countries to go back and readjust your income statements or your company statements. So there's a huge opportunity there to analyze the data and go back and see where there is a potential to actually increase what you may have already adjusted or not adjusted at all, which will definitely give companies, again, some cash flow or relief in the current aspect. I mean, you talked also about the digital world in terms of digitalization. I mean, everything is moving into the digitalization, and of course, VAT reclaim is no different. So that whole process needs to become more of a digitalized or automated process. So saving, of course, employee time and effort, but also removing that manual process, which is subject to human error, is a key consideration for companies. The other aspect, of course, is the document recovery side. So making sure that you are compliant when you do submit, and also when you're audited, making sure that you have a fully compliant solution that's, of course, in our instance, surrounded by global tax experts that basically are updating constantly the local and international regulations and requirements. And that's, I think, a crucial aspect here, that really think about the compliance aspect. How compliant are you? Are you taking measures to reduce the risk? And therefore, are you also leaving money on the table as well? So I would definitely look at those areas.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for that, Mark. And so, what's the first step, right? If you've got an organization or a customer that is interested in either understanding how compliant they are, or maybe what could their potential reclaim be? What do they do? How do they start?
Yeah, so I think first of all, I mean, the solution that we provide has, dashboards highlighting their spend, and of course, estimated VAT reclaim over the last 2 years. So without processing everything, we can already today, via the account manager or client success manager, actually provide an overview to show where their spend is and where the potential of VAT is, together with some kind of industry standard, disqualifications. So running through what are the common things that basically are being disqualified, and kind of weighing that up against the numbers that they have from their spend perspective and VAT reclaim perspective. So I think, in the meetings that I've had with customers today, this is a really good insight into their business. It's a very quick overview, but it really gives them an idea of, and maybe they can compare of what they're doing today to what the potential is, and that's the very quick win for the customer to get that overview. So as I said, reach out to your account manager or client success manager to get that done.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Mark, it was really great chatting with you on this topic, and thanks for sharing all of the stories and all of the things that you've been speaking to customers about. Again, of course, for those of you who are listening, feel free to get in touch with your account manager, or I'd love to hear from you as well. How does this solution fit your needs? And I'm sure Mark would as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
with that, thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, and thanks everyone for listening.
Bye.